Hey, and welcome back, everybody, to the spring deep dive series where I take a 50,000-foot look at all 138 FBS teams, talking about who got added, who was removed from each team's roster over the past year, as well as talking about what I think each team is going to have from a record perspective in the 2026 college football season. And of course, giving you that ranking of every team. So, very excited to be back in the Midwest once again for this next team. And I hope you guys are excited for this deep dive. If you've been enjoying this series, I need you to do a couple of things for me real fast. Hit that like button and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel, as well as give me your comments on feedback or what you think about this Kent State football team going into the season. And let's get it going with our 100th and 26th ranked team in major college football entering this season. That is going to be your Golden Flashes of Kent State, led by Mark Carney, who rightfully so got that interim tag removed after for them was a pretty good season. You look at that 5-7 record, and normally that isn't very much to write home about whatsoever. But you have to realize what Kent State football was before he took over. Prior to him taking over, we're talking about the Kenny Burns era, an era where he finished 1-23 in his 2 years as the head coach of the Kent State Golden Flashes. And originally, he was slated to at least return for this season, if not for some debt being exposed that was bought on a company credit card from the university, which ultimately led to his dismissal. It was not because of his performance on the field. So Mark Carney took over in what was a messy situation and taking over what quite literally was the worst team in the FBS, at least according to our power rankings at the start of last year. And he took that same team and had a solid season with them. Almost made it to a bowl game, finished 5-7. And now we find out whether we're going to give Mark Carney that benefit of the doubt in terms of he is the long-term head coach at Kent State. He is the right fit for them until further notice. It's just now a matter of did he catch lightning in a bottle a little bit because there was a rally around the flag effect, given that their head coach was suddenly fired, creating a special transfer window for some of these Golden Flash kids if they wanted to take it outside of the normal transfer windows that we saw last year? Or do we see that more sustainable success for Kent State football in 2026? So that's the question with him. I do like the atmosphere and the culture that he is building, and just an incredible job that he did last year. And I'm hoping that he can keep that going. But it is going to be a challenge to try and keep that going, right? Because we saw several aspects of this roster do get diminished because of those effects on the transfer portal. They, for example, lost Cade Walford, who was a star wide receiver for them last year. Huge loss because he's no longer with the Golden Flashes. He ended up instead taking I-71 down to Cincinnati, Ohio, and he's going to be part of the Cincinnati Bearcats entering the 2026 campaign. But then it's not just Cade Walford that left, even though he was the biggest loss to this team. They did also lose Deshaun Martin as well, who silently had a pretty good year, ended up with over 500 scrimmage yards and 4 touchdowns. He's now part of the Virginia Cavaliers roster. They also lost a little bit of a surprising one here. They lost Garrett Masterson. He was an offensive tackle and someone that 247 was even hyping up a little bit because he was given a 3-star rating on 247 Sports. He actually leaves for FCS Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech had a really good season, but normally we don't see players of his caliber, at least that highly rated in the transfer portal, go from the FBS down to the FCS. It's usually the other way around. And this was someone that probably would have started for Kent State, so losing him is a loss for the Golden Flashes for sure. And then they did lose some key defensive pieces on the defensive side of the ball. They lose Jamon Mathis, who was an edge rusher, had 6 sacks for him. Very relatively productive guy. He's now part of the Texas Tech Red Raiders revamped defense. While Jair Rollison, who played corner for him last year, he is now part of the West Virginia Mountaineers. So multiple guys transferring to power conference programs here in the 2026 campaign. Still some pieces here for the Golden Flashes to work with, though. Darius Clark was arguably one of the best receivers in this conference last year, and he is back from a kick return standpoint. So he was the most dangerous kick returner in this conference. An incredible name too, Darius Clark. He's back, but he's going to be expected to take more of a conventional role on top of his kick return duties because Cade Walker and Deshaun Martin did leave in the transfer portal. And they still have one of their leaders on the defense last year in CJ Young, who played linebacker for this Kent State squad. He was a second team All MAC player, and he is back as well for the 2026 campaign. And speaking of that linebacking room, I am intrigued by the linebackers going into this season. I think that's going to be a strength for the Golden Flashes as well. Shamaze Bridgman is a name to definitely keep an eye on. A little bit of a dart throw ad, transfers in from Michigan State. He hasn't played very much since he's entered the college ranks, but he is a former blue chip recruit. So a good dart throw ad where if he doesn't really produce, it's not the end of the world. But if he does end up being a good complement to CJ Young, then you're really talking about a nice linebacking duo and could be one of the better linebacking cores that we see in the entirety of the Mid American Conference. So that's really your notable returnees. They did end up losing more than what they ended up backfilling in the transfer portal. Do have a couple of all conference guys returning. And not to mention from a schedule standpoint, I do want to point this out specifically for Kent State as I throw this schedule graphic up. So this year, Kent State does have the most difficult schedule in this conference. And it's not just because of the non-conference play, right? You're talking about South Carolina and Ohio State on the road, the type of games that you're going to play to help prepare you for conference play, as well as get some additional money for the athletic department as well. But you also have the University of South Florida on the road. Brand new head coach and Brian Hartline might not be the same team as last year, but still a solid football team out there in Tampa. Kent State will have their hands full, particularly in the trenches. Do see a solid win for them. I do think that they should handle Wofford with ease. So a step in the right direction because this time last year didn't have any safe wins for Kent State. Now we do. So we like that. Problem is they do have the slate for conference play isn't ideal either. You're talking about Western Michigan on the road. You also have Miami of Ohio, which I think could you could be looking at as a premier contender for winning this conference at the end of the year. I think that's in play. You're also talking about having to make a cross country road trip to Sacramento State. Making cross country road trips historically has not gone well for the road team. And then you back that up with road games to Bowling Green as well as road games to Eastern Michigan. So the road slate in the month of November in particular is going to be a difficult one, and it might be a make or break, but they're not impossible to win by any means. So I've seen this on Twitter from folks like the Kent State Agenda Pusher, for example, where 7-5 is possible. I agree. I think if everything does end up going right, I do think that 7-5 is realistic, but I have that as more of a ceiling instead of an expectation for Kent State going into the second year of the Mark Carney era. So realistically, I actually do have them taking a little bit of a step back from a record perspective. I do think they beat Ball State at home, and I do think that they win the wagon wheel once again, beating Akron for at least the second year in a row and getting to that 3-9 mark. But I want to preface this by saying that even though I think Kent State is going to take a step backwards from a record perspective, I still think that at least while I don't know if this team is as good as what Kent State ended up being at the end of last year, I think this spring, compared to last spring, Kent State is a superior football team. And the spring version of this team would wipe the floor with last year's spring version of Kent State football. So a 3-9 record, taking slightly a step back, but that's more of a byproduct of the schedule being the toughest schedule in this conference. Oh, and they also have Ohio, which is one of the best programs in the MAC. They have to play them as well. I do want to point that out too, real fast as a little footnote. But a 3-9 record, a team still trying to climb itself up to relevancy. But I like the head coach. They do have a couple of interesting pieces in place. Linebackers should be really good for Kent State. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are down below. What are you feeling about Kent State football going into 2026? I'm always interested to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed the 50,000 foot perspective of all 138 FBS teams, definitely leave a like on this video and make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new to the channel, there's a lot of work that goes into the background. So you doing those things would really help me out tremendously. And with that being said, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.